No one has ever gotten fat on chicken, brown rice, and broccoli. Hey, everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. If you would, though, please give me a like down below. It would be greatly appreciated. If you aren't following me or subscribed, please do so, and leave me a comment underneath the video. I would greatly appreciate that. Let's get over to the point. I'm going to talk about this, and it's going to upset people, particularly those who want to talk about purely about calories in versus calories out, who don't understand what that means. Because again, this gets brought up, and all these people who talk about, well, we can have junk food and garbage in moderation, all this nonsense. I disagree with that. I think junk food should be illegal, my personal opinion. I think you should go to prison for giving it to your children. All right, strong opinion. People cannot like it, but it's my opinion. Doesn't mean that it's going to be enforced. Doesn't mean you have to have the same opinion. It's my opinion. So you can imagine how I feel about this idea. And I'm not saying we can't eat clean and gain fat. I want to be clear on that also. We absolutely can. But I gave a very specific example here. Chicken, brown rice, and broccoli. Does anybody understand how difficult it would be for a physically active person to gain any amount of body fat eating those? And I mean, I'm not saying, well, if we add other fats, or no. If that's like the staples of your diet, especially chicken breast, leaner chicken, brown rice, and broccoli. From an energy perspective, a calories out perspective, a digestion perspective, it would be absurdly, obscenely difficult to get fat doing that. Let me be clear on that. And it's because we are still dealing with calories in, calories out. There's a reason so many bodybuilders successfully do that. You know, you get people who are like, well, you know, that doesn't even make sense, because then how are they gaining muscle if they're not overeating? Well, because you don't have to really overeat that much to gain muscle. And that's what people forget. And again, if you're someone who is right now 170 pounds, and that's a whole other topic, and you eat at maintenance with really clean food and with your perfect programming, you'll probably just recomposition at 170 without even a surplus, especially if the protein is high. And even then, if you gain, you don't need to gain that much weight. That's the other end of the equation. Like if you're gaining weight faster than you can gain muscle, you're just getting fat. So yeah, that's kind of the point. So if you're advanced enough, you can only gain 2 pounds of muscle in a year. You don't need to gain more than 2 pounds of body weight in a year. Done. All right, so back to the point. Think about it from the calories in, calories out perspective, the satiety issue, the thermic issue. All right, there's very, very low fat in there. Now, could you possibly develop some fat deficiencies on that? Yeah, sure. So maybe a person might throw a little fish oil in, or a little bit of salmon or something once a week to bridge that gap. Perfectly reasonable. I'm just giving the chicken, brown rice, and broccoli as a proxy, by the way. Okay, so what are we looking at from a metabolic end? It's going to be high protein. Protein has its own recomposition and thermic effects. It also has satiety. In fact, protein overfeeding has been shown to cause fat loss. So if you force excessive protein overfeeding, even if you try to force a surplus, what does the research show? You lose body fat. Even in a technical supposed calorie surplus. This has been studied. My friend Alex Leaf co-authored the biggest study on this, by the way, the biggest one they did in the lab. And that's what they found. All the test subjects lost fat. They tried to force them to eat like 400 grams of protein, and they worked out they all lost fat. So then we come and look at the other stuff, brown rice. All the stuff people complain about with the fiber and the possible phytic acid and all this stuff, yeah, that's also going to make it very difficult to gain body fat. It's very hard to overeat brown rice. Slower digestion, the fiber content, the phytic acid, it's going to tend to stop you from overeating. It's going to tend to potentially even cause you to expel certain amounts of extra fat in your fecal matter due to the nature of the food. Okay? And at that same token, when we overfeed carbohydrates, what happens? Carbohydrates don't store as body fat in humans. And when you're dealing with a very slow digesting carbohydrate like that, unless you are adding a significant fat source to it, okay, you're not going to gain body fat. It is almost impossible to gain significant body fat. Not saying you can't gain a little bit, but you got to push it. In fact, even carbohydrate overfeeding studies, we don't see ever carbohydrates get stored subcutaneously. They only in small amounts get stored as visceral fat. So 0 under your skin. All the fat that is under your skin came from your dietary fat. All of it. Every last bit of it. That is a pretty much as close to a scientific fact as you're going to get. Not once ever, even in carbon isotope testing, has protein or carbohydrate ever converted into fat that was stored subcutaneously in a human. It has never been found to occur. They've tried. It might go to your liver, particularly like refined sugars, around your organs. You don't get any under your skin. That's all from the fat we eat. And yes, I have fat under my skin because I have eaten fat. It's very straightforward. It's pretty simple. But back over to our point there. All right. That is very much what's going on. And so when you're eating a carbohydrate like that tends to fill you up, lowers absorption, slows down absorption, same thing with the broccoli being added, what ends up happening? You have very high insulin sensitivity. Okay. We have great metabolic health. So the second we start cutting out refined sugars and saturated fats and things like that, our metabolic health improves. You start adding fiber to it, our metabolic health improves. We have improved insulin sensitivity. So when people want to talk about hormonal environment, like, well, it's not just calories and carbohydrates, it's hormones. But then they don't understand how to affect the hormones. There's a degree of truth to that because those hormones affect calories in, calories out, uncoupling proteins, thermic effect, all of this stuff. Sure, absolutely. But then they'll do something stupid like, oh, let's eat a bunch of butter and bacon because of insulin. Instead of saying, hey, what gives us the best insulin sensitivity? What's the best way to lower circulating insulin? What makes your body extremely sensitive to it so it produces very little of it? Well, besides obviously lifting weights, eating in the manner I just described. There's a reason people who eat like that are jacked and lean. Does anyone think it's an accident that is a traditional bro bodybuilder diet? The most muscular people on earth, there's a whole culture built around eating that exact sort of meal plan. Does anyone think that it's a coincidence? Especially when you look at the data? No, it's not. It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense, guys. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.